Hello, welcome. I'm Tristan Hightower. I'm the Director of Chapter and SIG operations now with the IGDA. I focus on our external communities, our chapters around the world, and our special interest groups. This panel today is, I put it together because I really thought that it was important to talk about the importance of a game development community and the support that they bring. I will go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm currently leader of IGDA Austria chapter. I also run the Reversed Festival in Vienna, and I'm a developer as well.
My name is Christopher Hamilton. I'm a producer at Rovio. I'm one of the lead coordinators for the Helsinki hub at IGDA Finland, and I was recently elected to the IGDA Global Board. I also have a background in NGO development, and I entered the gaming industry by translating games from Russian into English.
My name is Mariana. I'm head of growth at Estonian-based company Great Mobile and also head of Estonian chapter of IGD.
I'm Alexander Horn. I'm the acting lead narrative designer at Ubisoft Reflections. I'm not currently part of the IGDA. However, I was a long time ago, and I was actually a chapter organizer in Philadelphia, which is how I actually got my start in games. I was an indie developer in Philadelphia, and there's no major AAA studio or large game development scene in Philadelphia. There's just indies, really hobbyists and students. And at the time, a very wise woman suggested that I get involved in the community and started, helping organize meetings and events and student events and all kinds of, community building parties and talks and everything. And that actually got me involved more in the indie scene. Like before that, I was basically just a hobbyist. Didn't think that I could do this for a living or make games for a living. It was just something I did on my own time, and it was eye-opening to just meet this whole huge network of developers making games professionally in their own spare time as indies in Philadelphia.
Awesome. So Alex talked a little bit in his intro about how his local game development community inspired or got him started or was really a foot in the door for getting into the industry. What are some other types of benefits or value, or what can come out of having a local game development community? Why is it important?
I think networking is probably the biggest and most important and most obvious thing that people get out of this. Not only, I think of my first experience when I went to the first conference I ever went to. I'd probably been working at the company for 9 to 10 months. And when I understood more how my company fit into the whole ecosystem of things, what it was like dealing with our publishers, what other companies were doing, I began to really approach my work with a completely different perspective that was really eye-opening. And it would have been really cool to have a local community that could have helped me with this way before that. Beyond that, it's, they're just opportunities to meet with people. If you're dealing with a situation at your company, or maybe you're having problems with, like, say, external QA, or you need video trailers made for your game, or something like this, there's probably somebody at one of these meetups that has experience with that and could potentially make a recommendation.
A wild table appears.
Yes, a wild table appears. Yeah, in my case, I started doing this event. Back then it was still called Radius Vienna, mainly because I thought I was completely alone in Austria with game development, because I had just started and it was completely new to me as well. And then slowly found out that, oh, there's a meetup here, and oh, there's actually, definitely 20 to 30 people coming back every month with maybe 10 new faces every time and that kind of stuff. So it is really important to connect to the people around you, to find basically other people that are having the same struggles, having the same problems, and maybe even know the solution, simple or hard. I think that's definitely one of the main points.
To add to that, just to be inspirational as well. Like, it's really good when you can get a group of people together, and it could be a small group of people, but you've got 30 or 40 people, and you have people that have the same interests or same passions, that maybe they're actually doing at work, maybe they're not, but they get to explore it. And it could be something that's not even like work related. It could be just a passion for board games, but you find like-minded individuals and you connect with them, and that's also super important.
Well, to wrap it up, like in Estonia, we have a very strong startup culture in general, and the largest number of startups per capita in entire Europe. But there was no many startups in games until recently. And what happened that our community started growing and people stopped being afraid of taking the risk of starting a business in games. So they wanted to do it for their entire life, but they didn't feel safe enough to start a business. But when you have a strong community behind you, which can hold your hand and back you up, then it is much easier to take in this risk.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, how many of you have a local game development community in your area? Awesome. Okay. So there's a bunch that don't. So let's say now we've inspired those people and they want to go back and are thinking about maybe starting a local game dev community. What are some types of things, Chris and Tom, that they should think about or consider if they want to start one?
Well, in our case, definitely there were already people meeting up. There are already hubs of developers, probably either if it's just meeting up for a drink or meeting up, like in our case, actually set up an entire evening every month with talks and games to play that were made by the community, that kind of stuff. I think the most important thing is to, first of all, already connect with already existing developer communities, developer meetups, whatever. And then see how can you make this better, how can you support usually people that are already established in the scene with what they're doing, how can you help them make this bigger or just connect everyone that's already there. In our case, it's a big one in Vienna, but there's also a big one in Graz, which one of my colleagues over there is sitting from. So for me, it was really important to connect the two cities because actually those communities are almost equal size. So it would be insane not to have any kind of communication across them. Chris?
Sure. IGDA Finland is a little different from other chapters in the sense that we have 12 different hubs that are running in 12 different cities in Finland. We collaborate and support one another. And we had issues with kind of one of the chapters due to the fact that people move on or get pregnant or move to Helsinki to take a job there, that leadership there sort of goes away. Or so when we're looking to create a new one in a new city, we kind of want to make sure that there's sort of 5 individuals that are going to be there that have sort of committed to the idea, that they have understood who the key stakeholders in that city are going to be it universities, be it an existing game studio, understand what resources can help them, whether it's in that city itself or whether it's somebody like our umbrella organization that can help them. And one example of and it doesn't necessarily have to be completely game focused in the sense that we, in the city of Kuopio, there are no game developers there. There are a couple indies. They're more medical technology places, and they have a lot of interesting game jams and all of this sort of stuff, and some studios have grown out of that, but it was largely the community that was sort of spurred on that led that growth. So just kind of organizing all of that, and then kind of coming up with a name, perhaps creating a mission statement, and then getting that idea out, like creating a time, creating a meeting space, and making it happen.
I think that Estonian chapter is one of the youngest in IGDA family, and we're only started in 2014. And since then, we made a growth of over 300% in terms of memberships and in terms of companies in local game dev community. But in the beginning, it was a very hard work involved because I literally had to talk to every person, personally invite them to the events, to our meetups, calling them, emailing them, frequently reminding them about our existence. And this is actually what helped a lot to form the core of the communities that started growing organically further.
I don't really have anything to add to that.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
It's not a job for a shy person, I guess. You got to be social.
So Tom talked about it a little bit. What if there's already existing communities? Like what would be pros and cons of starting something new versus working with stuff that's already there, or what might you want to do there?
That's a good question. So, well, like I mentioned a little bit, is that I think the important position to take there is to try and help whoever's already there to improve whatever they're doing. Mostly, from my experience in talking to other community leaders and that kind of stuff, is that usually it's not much of a problem of staying together, but having like a way out. So what I try to do, for example, is to bring the international talent to Austria. So to try and connect the people that are already there, already doing talks, already doing postmortems, that kind of stuff, to maybe bring like an international guest, or to provide, well, for example, through the IGDA, provide the support network that we have for anyone that has questions about how to get started, not just in Austria, but in the world when it comes to game dev. So that will be one plan of attack, basically. Marianne, do you have another insight there?
Yeah.
No, Chris?
Okay.
I can.
Oh, yep, sorry.
I can just say that Helsinki is probably one of the biggest hubs that we have. We're regularly holding events that will attract 400 plus people. There are tons of things that are happening in Helsinki. You've got professionally organized, registered organizations like IGDA Finland, Finnish Game Jam, Fiverr, which is the Finnish VR society. You've also got a lot of informal things. There's Metric Mondays for data scientists that are sponsored by a company that runs an analytics company in town. You have the free-to-play lovers group, which is just this unofficial Facebook group that I got added to. And basically, when a company has a postmortem of a free-to-play game, they'll buy a bunch of pizza, invite a bunch of people over, and then be very frank and honest about what failed in the game, and then get a lot of feedback from other people that can help them kind of iterate from that, or prevent all of us that they've invited in from making the same mistakes. And sort of a victim of our own success, there's a new organization called Indie Beer, because they got fed up with all of the structure that we have in all these organizations and just wanted to meet up and drink beer. So it's kind of interesting how all that works, but at the same time, we feel that it's really good to collaborate with a lot of these organizations. So we'll have some of them come in and give presentations. We'll have Fiverr come in and organize demos, particularly if we're holding like a big party that is connected to another organization. Like we hosted a big party for Slush, which is a big startup conference in Helsinki. We'll have people from Fiverr come and demo stuff, because it is something that's kind of sexy and will attract people in, and people will start asking questions both about Fiverr and IGDA. So on the one hand, it's challenging because you can begin to see your members get really excited about other things. At the same time, I'm happy for them because they have a place to really exercise their passion and still be involved with us.
I want to join that free-to-play lovers group. Sign me up for that.
Awesome. Okay, so Mariana, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so in our case, we're not that big as Finland, of course, but still, recently we are seeing many local interest groups and forming inside the community. So we have a separate community for artists who do their own meetups and workshops because they want to get more into technical details of their work and processes. Now we also have the so-called game dev club for students, where students who are interested in game dev, they can come there, find a team, and try working on some game. And also we have like a separate thing for programmers. They have their own meetups, so they can also go there and learn some insights about programming and coding and stuff. But we're trying to keep IGDA Estonia meetups more general, more business-related and focused on networking.
So it sounds like you really need to find out what you need in your local community. What's out there, what's not out there, what do people want, what do people need, and also empower people to go and do other things?
Well, the little problem here is that there are so many different jobs in game dev.
Yes.
And what is interesting for artists is not that interesting for programmers or game designers. So this is why sometimes we have to, if we want to make it more focused, then we need a community inside the community that will run their own events related to this particular technical topic.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Alex and Mariana, I know you both had some things that you wanted to say about how can you get people involved, whether it's attending or speaking or presenting or just encouraging people to get involved. Mariana, I know you talked about that a little bit already. I don't know if you have more. I know Alex has some things.
Yeah, well, I think it's like you said, like you have to talk to the people and individually get them involved, get them to come along. I remember in Philly, it was a kind of difficult situation because there were a lot of students who were interested in coming to the events. Obviously, they're looking forward to when they graduate and trying to get into the industry. But like I said, there aren't a lot of professionals in Philly, so getting the few professionals that were there to come and have to talk with students for like 2 hours, to each student, was a tricky situation. And similarly, getting people to come from outside was difficult, right? But there are ways to overcome that. Like Mariana said, just making those connections personally and building a good rapport with the community is super important. And also not privileging one over the other, right? Like you do want to have content for students, right? That's the future scene, right? When those students graduate, they're the ones who are going to be making up the indies. And I still, am in contact with a bunch of people there who graduated from Drexel or from Penn, and now they're working, all over the world, right? And there's one in Germany. There's another guy who helped me organize who is in Boston, in California. So it's really just making those personal connections and appealing to what they're interested in.
Well, my way was to actually handpick some individuals who already have some influence in the community, who can be like informal leaders, to show an example that like getting up on the stage and giving a talk, it's easy. Everyone can do that. So you can do that and you can do that.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing where it's like that will appeal to people in terms of like, hey, this is good practice for giving talks. It's a smaller, more intimate scene, and you can really, work on your material for the presentation, revise it, get feedback. You can get a lot of feedback, like personalized feedback. So it's a supportive environment, right? Everyone is kind of there because they love games and they love making games, and it's not a it just helps foster this growth. So yeah, I mean, there's something for there's something for everyone, right? Every step of professional, from student to like aged veteran, can get something out of it.
Chris or Tommy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to add that like we will have more specific talks, and we're not afraid of that. We know that a lot of the people that are coming to that may not be interested in a particular art thing, but we know that they're likely to be coming later for drinks and networking late anyways. If we have some sort of company that's coming that's going to sponsor something, we do ensure that they make that we get local people to come and talk about what they're more or less talking about, and make sure whatever presentation that they give is sort of tech agnostic. They're not kind of selling anything, but they're just talking about a particular topic that their company happens to cover.
Okay. I want to get a little bit more into some of the fun stuff. So what are, you each are involved in local communities. What are some common hurdles that organizers of a community might run into, and have you found solutions for them? It's totally okay if you haven't. Maybe somebody else does already. But yeah, I just want to hear like what somebody might stumble over.
Well, sometimes I have these nightmares that I organize a gathering, a meetup, and I come into the room and there's only 3 people in there. That's scary, you know?
Well, let's elaborate on that. So when we had talked about that when we were prepping, when you first started IGDA Estonia, can you elaborate a little bit about how you were like the consistency and all those things you tried?
Well, our first meetup was at Creative Mobile's office, and we had 12 people there. Of those, 7 were from Creative Mobile. Now, that wasn't very big, but still we had a very nice conversation about how can we make this community grow, because as I mentioned previously, so I handpicked individuals who have some influence, who have some connections in the industry in general. So we just sat together and thought like how we can make this grow, how we can make it happen. So it is not only me, there were many other people involved, including game design university teachers, there's student game dev clubs, and of course game founders, which back then was still operating in Estonia.
What about this kind of can go back to helping with the getting started. You said that in the beginning you weren't meeting regularly, and can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so what we learned from our case is that consistency is the #1 thing that you have to have. Because in the beginning we did our meetups occasionally, so if I know that some cool guy is in town, like Chris, for example, or we had Mike Hines from Amazon speaking one day as well. So I was trying to adjust to their schedule and planning a meetup accordingly to the trip of the speaker when they could do that. It didn't work that well. So after some time, we figured out that if we make our meetups, our events, every month, on the same day, same time, same place, then people will get used to it, and after a couple of months, they already develop a habit coming to these meetups and meeting people there. So this is what we did. We started doing our meetups on a regular basis, so it is every second Thursday of each month, 7 o'clock, Launch 5 Bar, Estonia Puesta 5, if somebody knows where it is. And yeah, people already know that something cool is going to happen. So we don't need to send them reminders, we don't need to send them personal invitations. It makes my work much easier as an event coordinator, and it also makes the word of mouth work better, because people are inviting their friends. They know that something cool is going to happen and there is free beer, so come along.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about like having a community is the important part, right? Is that it exists. Like, if you don't have a huge showing, is that a failure for a community? I mean, not really. It's like, do you value quality over quantity, right? Just because you only have 12 people doesn't mean that they're not going to build a closer relationship or build a stronger bond, right? So the important thing is to have that presence, right? To have something happening community-wise instead of nothing. But my question would be like, I wanted to do that when I was in Philly, but one of the problems that I had was just coming up with content, right? Because again, it's a smaller community, and pretty quickly we would run through every company and every indie like in the city. You know, like we wouldn't have been able to go a whole year without, if we did monthly meetings, without running out of content. So, yeah.
Well, I can suggest a solution for that. So, first, I also struggled like finding content and stuff, but someday I just realized that it doesn't matter what the content is. It doesn't matter that much. Of course, if we have a superstar speaker coming in, we get more people there, but these are most likely those will be people who will come only to one session, and probably they will never come again. Right. So irrelevant traffic, how we call it in game dev. So if I couldn't manage to get a speaker Oh, I just did a presentation myself, or I just took our CEO, Vlad, we put him on the stage, and we did all ask me anything session. So there's always a way to fill the content in. Now, even if your announced speaker got sick or didn't show up or anything else happened, you always can find the ways to entertain people and to make the best out of it. So also one of the good tricks is to make like an intense networking session. So when you act as a moderator and ask people like to stand up, to shake a hand of a person from on your right, to shake a hand of a person on your left, exchange business cards, talk a little. Now, who's an artist here? Who's a programmer here? So, okay, you two match together, we have common interest, and also here we have a demo corner, and like having demo corners on meetups also brings a lot of value, both for the studio who presents the product, and also for the community in general, and for me as an event coordinator, because it is also content that that I can offer at the event. So there are always ways to figure this out.
And there's always beer, so.
Yeah.
Just have drinks. That's the secret.
Yeah, I was just going to add about the demo corner, and that even if you've got like a Global Game Jam or the other organizations around, they would love it if you could organize a post-play party. So even if you don't have something to schedule, that's something you can definitely put into your schedule and move content to a later date. Going back to numbers, we had an experience where we had 5 very passionate people that were trying to get the community in Pori off the ground, and I think they went 5 months before they got a 6th person to actually show up. And so be prepared for a lot of pain or like frustration or feeling like maybe you're not reaching people. And part of it was they had scheduled it when there was some other stuff going on. It wasn't in people's routine. It really took a while for them to get the message out and for people to understand that and get it into their schedules. So I don't think that's something to consider a failure or freak out about. You just need to be a little bit persistent about some of these things. Yeah. Moving on to another sort of casualty or issue that we have is, and I would say is burnout, particularly in some of our smaller hubs where there are only 1 or 2 really active people that are there that are kind of pulling heavy loads. And a lot of that is just having the larger community there to support them. I know we've worked sort of beyond Finland recently. Both Vessa's also on the board, and he's the chairman of IGDA Finland right now. But Chris from Switzerland had reached out. They had met each other at a conference. He had been organizing Skype call sort of talks with people so people could actually get real question and answer sessions in, and that's sort of another content thing that you can do. But I think just the fact that we were there and we were really supportive of what he was doing and we were helping him find speakers for his event really eased the stress that he was feeling. And I think that's one of the huge advantages of being part of an international organization where really there's like a brotherhood and sisterhood of everything that's going on here. And it's just good to know. It's good to meet people. It's good to just maybe call a friend and say, I'm really stressed. Do you have any ideas? Do you have any thoughts? Yeah. Can you help us mitigate this? Finland's really privileged because we have so many people, and we have sort of stalwart volunteers that might have been part of our founders that have owned their own companies that aren't really involved in the organization anymore, but are often very happy to step in to fill in for something or just step up when people are really kind of falling down.
Yeah, I didn't burn out per se, but I could see it coming. So like I purposefully wanted to get the next person in line. Like, who's going to be the next coordinator for the Philly chapter, right? Like, that was the last thing before I left Philly that I did. I was like, I don't want to just peace out and leave this, you know, and let it die. Like, I need to find volunteers that are going to take over. So that was really useful.
Yeah. The other thing is just rewarding your volunteers, trying to have some sort of volunteers night out. Remember, this needs to be fun. So if you can organize like a special evening out for all your volunteers and go out and drink some beer or maybe go to an escape room or something, that also kind of gives volunteers more motivation to stay involved and keep involved.
Yeah. There's a good saying, like, you have to have fun to make, you got to have fun to make fun, right?
Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about burnout. We talked about getting started a little bit. Is there other in getting started with your community that somebody might stumble on or have trouble with? The one that I really focus on is there were 6 months where they were only 5 people before the 6th person showed up. Like, what happens if you give up, if they gave up at that 5th month and the 6th person showed up and you weren't there? Now you've just totally wrecked everything that you were trying to create and stuff like that, so.
I think there should be the same approach as for running a business. If in 5 months you fail to get people to your event, that there is something wrong on your business side of things. So probably you should just analyze your actions, analyze your marketing, PR.
And add more free beer.
No. Well, I don't drink beer, so I will never
I think
come to your
that
meeting.
beer really matters that much, because we run events that doesn't include free beer, and still they're pretty successful, and people come there, and they can afford buying a beer themselves. That's not a big issue.
Right. No, I'm definitely not advocating, oh yeah, just add more free beer to every situation. It will make it better. I'm just saying that for us, for example, so these meetups that were already there, that weren't organized by any of us, were very technical. They had a lot of long talks, then even some more games to play. But the most important part of that meetup for me was the 10 minutes in between as a break, where you could just stand outside while people were drinking something and smoking something. So our idea was to, hey, how about we take the drinking and the smoking part and make it into the 2-hour experience. Maybe not do it as often, because that will just, kill all the fun. But just keep on the lookout for, oh, hey, this is kind of missing. How about we try and do this? And usually you will find other people that are really into it. And if it goes well, then you will automatically attract more people.
I do want to reiterate, though, that like the 5 people in a room for 6 months or whatever, like that's not necessarily a failure. Those 5 people are going to be super close and like, lifelong friends or whatever. So it's just a different type of community building, right? So if you have a smaller community, it's just it's a different look and it's a different strength than if like you have like IGDA Finland with like hundreds of people, right? And I think the problem is when you want one and you have the other, right? Like if you have a really small community and you want to grow it to hundreds of people, and that's gonna be a challenge to overcome. Similarly, if you have a huge community, I imagine it's difficult to build that kind of sense of like cohesion that you would have with a smaller group, right? So it's, they're just pros and cons. It's not a failure to have a small group. I think it's worthwhile if those 5 people remain a community for 10 years in a city. That's worthwhile. That has developed a culture, that has developed an identity, and those 5 people can go on to like start their own companies and start their own studios and grow the community like organically in whatever location they're in. So or go somewhere else, but it's still valuable, right? Like I see people from IGDA Philly all over the world, and every time I see them, it's like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, you're a producer at Epic Games now. You're, in California, like working at like Zynga or whatever. Like it's really impressive, and that community directly contributed to their success. And it's like there's a little piece of Philly in all of that Philly community in all of those places. So
I want to build a little bit on that. I know I didn't have it in the notes, so I apologize if I'm going to throw a curveball. So let's talk about the quantity versus quality thing a little bit. That Alex, you've brought it up a couple times, and I've had this conversation with other develop community organizers. The comparing themselves to another community. Let's say, if you're in an area where you only have 5 people, but those are the only 5 game devs in your neighborhood. So you've got a 100% dev to it, like 100% of the game dev people in your community are there. And we've also seen other people where they were bragging, well, we have hundreds of people show up to our networking event. And now I don't mean this as I mean, it's none of you people on this panel. But they have thousands of game developers in their community, so their ratio isn't really as good. So can we talk a little bit about some of that type of stuff? It's not, you don't compare yourself to other communities necessarily if you can.
Yeah, but why to limit your audience to only the game dev community? There are so many people around who work in different industries, in IT, in movie industry, who probably are dreaming to start their career in games, but they have no idea where to start from. So they come to these meetups, to these events to get more familiar with the industry in general and probably consider working there later. So, and I'll be short on that. So in terms of quality and quantity, I think that if the quality is there, the quantity will grow organically.
I totally agree with that. For me, coming from my unique place in Finland, I like to see the healthy competition between some of the cities. So like the Kajaani people are like always like hashtag Kajaani always wins, and they're super psyched, and wherever they go you see them always working together. Jyväskylä has a very similar group of people. That's for me kind of exciting to see. Helsinki fluctuates a lot. We had an unsponsored event with a GDPR theme last year that had a rather low turnout, but it was all sort of C-level people that came. Like the quality of people that actually turned out was really good. The other problem we have when we have so many people is you have all of the stalwart game developers that have been coming to our meetups for years saying, what are all these students doing here, and why are they asking me for a job, and I don't want to come to these meetings anymore because these people are ruining the show for me. And it's very difficult to be all things for all people. So in this case, we try to do side events, or we try to organize a special event just for C-level people and this sort of thing.
Yeah, I also want to say, Tristan, I think that that's actually a really great observation. Like, you don't want to compare yourself to any other chapter. You want to find what's special about the place that you're at, in your community, in your chapter, and use that to your advantage, right? Like, you can bring speakers from other chapters and share that way, but you don't have to try and mold the identity of your place. It's not going to work, right? So I'm currently in Newcastle, and they don't have an IGDA chapter, and I'm thinking about, you know, how I could start one there. And it's a challenge because, you know, there's like a cultural thing where it's like a lot of people there are against the idea of like enforced fun, or like, you know, this kind of fake, like, oh, we're going to all get together and, you know, force fun on people. They're really cynical and wary of that. So how can I get this across and be like, yo, we're all going to get together and it's going to be a fun, cool get together, meeting, mix up, whatever, without it coming across as like, you know, offending their sense of like, their cynical sense of like, this is complete garbage and BS. So that's a challenge, but I have to find what it is that makes the Newcastle community special and what appeals to them and what they're interested in order to be like, this is why we should have a community, this is why we should have a chapter that has regular events, because you guys like X and we have all of this X.
Did you find it yet?
No. It might be football, or I don't know. Jordy's, I have yet to figure them out, but I will.
I want to throw another quick question that we didn't talk based on something that had come up. I think you had said it. I'm going to assume that there's some students in the room. Can we give each of them one pro tip for being involved in their professional game development community, so that we don't, or it was Chris, I think, that said that so that they can be like, that was a good pro tip, I won't do that, or I will do that when I go to the next dev community meetup, gathering?
Well, a lonely warrior on the battlefield is not going to win the war, right? So you need a backup, you need a team, you need somebody to hold your hand while you're going through your career experiences, struggling from failures, celebrating your successes. If there is no one to hold your hand and no one to support you in these moments, then probably you will lose your motivation very quickly.
my tip to students, which is something I wish I had known before or had followed, would just be to, whenever saying anything publicly or engaging publicly with people, just imagine that you're like giving testimony on a trial, and that it will be saved forever, right? Because the internet is forever, and things that you say will come back to haunt you if you're reckless with your words. As students, we can be really, when we're younger, we can be really enthusiastic and have really strongly held opinions and say, I think this game is garbage, I think this game is great, blah, 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 you know? But then you find out, oh, this person worked on that game, oh, God, you know, and that's always terrible, so. Not that I've never done that, but.
Whoops.
Avoid foot in mouth syndrome.
Yeah, I think being a student and being just anybody at any point of their career, it's all about creating opportunities for yourself. So if you see an opportunity at an event or you want to volunteer, even don't wait for people to ask you to volunteer. Just kind of step up, find out who the organizers are, say you want to get involved. Odds are some of those organizers know people that can make introductions for you, so go ahead and volunteer for stuff. But man up, do it. Don't flake out on things. Show that you're responsible and can really handle stuff, and you're more likely to get a really good recommendation out of it. But I think the important thing is just to keep it fun.
I think something that Mariano's already talked about, which is people will say a lot of things, but they don't always necessarily will actually do them. So if you get someone that says, oh yeah, we want to help out, we're going to be there every day, or I don't know, some unreasonable promise, get back to them, offer them alternatives if they can't do it, you know, get behind them, make sure that there's backups in place in case they don't show up. Some people just want to do a lot of things, but don't have the time or don't actually have the affinity or the love for it or whatever that you have. So yeah, make sure that they know what they're getting into because you know already. That's my tip of the day.
Okay. So I want to, before we go into Q&A, if there's any Q, I want to ask everybody to share one quick, something that your community has done that you thought is really awesome or unique or special that might woo everybody.
So I was part of it, again, it was a long time ago, but I remember we were having like a going away event for Bronwyn. She was leaving, and we were like, it was like literally like 10 people in a pub. We were just like reminiscing about all the good times we had together and saying goodbye to our friend. And it was, you know, it was a little sad, but it was, at that moment, I was like, wow, look, we've really created this tightly knit community out of nothing. Like, literally a year before that, none of that had existed, right? And now here we were, like, celebrating someone's success and wishing them good luck and saying goodbye. And that is, like, my strongest memory, or my fondest memory of the IGDA. And again, it's unique. It's something special and not something that I've found anywhere else, really.
What makes me proud is probably our conference, Game Dev Days, that we host in Tallinn every year in April. And especially this year, I got in an accident during the construction of this thing, so I had to go to the hospital to fix my arm. So, but we had a bunch of volunteers there who actually supported the entire event. They did just enormous amount of job to get all this conference going. And I wasn't there because I was in the hospital, but still all our guests were happy, speakers were happy, like everyone enjoyed the event. And like thanks to the community and to the volunteers who heard the news that I fell and broke my arm, but still, so these guys, they helped us out a lot.
For me, my warmest memories were when, before I even moved to Finland, I was living in Russia. I went to a couple events in Helsinki and was just amazed at how open and helpful people in the Helsinki chapter were. I totally got introduced, and I needed to write articles, and everybody there just made it super easy. We're very welcoming, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so different from either America or Russia or any place I've ever been. Like, these people are truly amazing and giving and open. And I'm also really proud that people outside of the organization have entrusted the organization to host some really big events, including this huge party at Slush a number of years ago. And then with Wargaming, we collaborated on a huge party at a tank museum that was maybe an hour and a half outside of Helsinki and involved incredible logistics and buses from all over the country to get everybody at this party. And it was an amazing event, and I think it's something that all of our members will probably remember for the rest of their lives.
For me, it was when the biggest game dev company in Austria went down and had to kick out 80 or so developers, that they all came together and tried to find job posts, and even if it was IT or just non-game related stuff, that everyone basically came together and tried to, you know, help people that were obviously in need of help. So I liked that a lot.
Okay, cool. So that's it for what I had planned and not had planned. If you want to do, you can take one of the mics if there is any Q&A, I don't know.
Hi. Thank you, folks, for this wonderful talk. I first had a question for Mariana. I'm really into your idea of getting non-game dev folks into game dev communities. So I was wondering, for your community, do you have people from other industries in there? And if so, or if not, why? And how did you do it? How did you get in touch with them? Did you do just word of mouth, or did you have other ways of doing that?
It is word of mouth, and also I attend many professional events myself, so not related to gaming, so startup meetups, dev nights, and all these kind of events. So I invite people from there to join IGDA meetups and see what we are doing to share experiences, because like we share all the same technologies with most of the IT in terms of coding and stuff. We share same technologies with animation and filmmaking studio in terms of 3D art. So why not? And actually we see people coming from other creative industries that later switch to gaming and find a job in the gaming companies.
Okay, great. Thank you. If anyone else has a question, I'd be more than happy to pass over the mic. So you got one?
How do you find funding? Do some of the organizers actually get anything out of it for staying alive? And how do you find spaces to host the events?
So I'm going to nix the funding question. Funding is, we need a whole other panel for that one. There's so many things that we can get into with that. If you want to grab anyone after the panel, we can maybe do that. But then you had asked about space, so anybody can talk about that. Who wants to?
About finding an appropriate space or good space?
Finding spaces for having a meeting.
Yeah, typically try to find a place that's downtown, close to public transportation. Aim for a Monday or a Tuesday, like a bar that's really doesn't have much traffic or might even be closed on a Tuesday. But if you can say, hey, we can bring in 20 people, I can guarantee those 20 people are going to buy a couple beers. It might be worth it for them to open it, or they might have, it might be a large bar that only has a front space that's open on weekdays, but they'll open up the back space for you, because again, you're bringing in clientele for them. See if they've got stuff like TVs or monitors or stuff where you could actually have a space to both grow or have space for demo corners or tables and this sort of thing. Yeah, and that's like for adults, like if your target audience is, say, under 18, think about libraries, think about universities. These are also great places to host events.
Yeah, and I was just going to elaborate. Any type of a restaurant, really, that might have a backspace. I know where like the IHOP near me. I don't think IHOP is actually international, but the IHOP has space, like it's a breakfast restaurant. Like they have space in the back that you can rent or use. So it doesn't have to necessarily just be a bar, but yeah.
Well, as it happened to us, so we moved to a new venue 3 times already, and every time it was a karaoke bar. So I don't know how
I approve.
how big is the karaoke culture in your countries, but for us it works very well because every karaoke bar has a big screen, good sound system, microphones, and of course some drinks.
Have you had a presentation done to karaoke yet?
A couple of times we did, but I don't appreciate that.
Okay.
Wait, so there's a lot of karaoke bars in Tallinn?
There are a few.
Okay.
There are not that many that can fit 100 people or more than that, but there are a few pretty good karaoke bars that can fit like 50, 60 people at the time, which works for our meetups perfectly.
So you did it your way, basically. In Austria's case, just really quickly, there's actually a VR cafe in Vienna, so that's just the perfect match made in heaven, basically. Next, please.
So, what are your thoughts on unions and the relationship, or the why is it so prevalent as like maybe in the film industry?
That is part 3 of a workshop panel. Like, funding and unions are something that probably a 2-hour talk could be on.
Also very different between US and Europe.
Every country, I mean,
Yeah.
it probably varies in every, like, even in the States, labor laws vary so much.
Yeah.
That
There are
we
labor
just-
laws?
Well, they do or don't.
Yeah,
very,
right,
very
okay.
much. So it's too much. We would take forever to try to get into that topic.
Actually, maybe I can rephrase that question to be a little bit more familiar for this talk. You need to be the microphone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
perhaps
last
I
one.
can.
10
okay,
seconds.
Last one? Okay. So perhaps I can rephrase that question to be a little bit friendly for you guys. So what are your thoughts on how local communities can improve the working conditions of game developers?
For Austria, we were working on a trade body, which we've only now recently founded, for example. So there are ways to do basically lobbying to the government, because the government usually doesn't know, well, in our case, didn't know that games are a thing. So we had to educate them. Chris?
Years ago, there were a lot of issues where companies actively did not want to let their employees go to IGDA events because they were afraid they would get poached. Now there's just such a momentum with the organization. Most of those companies are members or affiliates themselves. And they, in order to just sort of keep and retain their employees, have to offer rather good packages or just to keep them.
I think one of the biggest ways is what Tom was saying about his favorite memory. When there's a studio closure or like a mass layoff, the community is really what comes to save people and help them find the next job, the next steps, and that's something that IGDA can help. Like, you just go to the next meeting, the next IGDA meeting, and you're gonna instantly be like, oh, you were hit by the layoff? Oh, this studio, my studio's hiring, or this studio's hiring, or that. And it's like, that's a direct way that it helps. So.
Well, probably our organization is still too young to face some kind of these problems. So nothing like this happened to us yet, but probably because Estonian authorities do their job very well in terms of labor laws and like environment laws, because everything is regulated by the law, like how big the office space should be and how do you hire and fire people. So all this is regulated by government, so we don't really need to look into this.
Okay, so thank you very much to our panel. One round of applause, please. Go build a community.
All out of time for this segment.